One of the most important skills that you can learn is how to properly interpret your meta ads data so that you can make informed decisions to improve your ad results. Now, there's so many different metrics out there. Which ones should we focus on? In today's video, I'm gonna break down all the most important metrics so that you know exactly what to look for and how to diagnose common issues with your meta ads metrics. After watching this video, you're gonna be able to tell exactly what's going on in your funnel and where your problems may lie. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, let's jump right into it. So we are in the Ads Manager, and I'm gonna walk you through each and every metric that I look at and the various columns and how I have it set up so you can set it up in the same way. So here we go. Starting from left to right, we're gonna go through all of them. So on the farthest left column, we have the on and off toggles. Obviously, that's always there. We have our campaign name, always there. We have delivery, whether it's on or off, so we like to look at that. And then we have our attribution setting. I tend to keep it in here. Most of the time I'm using 7-day click, 1-day view, but in certain cases I will remove the 1-day view if I'm seeing Meta is just putting ads in front of people that would already convert anyways. But that's a topic for another day. Budget, super important to have here, just so you can easily see how much you're spending for each campaign, or if you're using ABO or ad set budget optimization, you can see how much budget each ad set is getting per day. And then now we get into the metrics. So first is going to be amount spent. I always like to look at amount spent. I don't want to have to scroll to see how much I've spent. And usually when I'm assessing my data, I'm always sorting by amount spent. That's something that's pretty crucial. I like to see my results from where I'm spending the most money down to the least. And typically I like to see what we see here, right? The highest spending campaign has the highest ROAS. That's ideal. Okay, so we have our amount spent. Then we have our results column. So one thing to know about the results column is it's going to show you whatever you're optimizing for in that particular campaign. So in this case, the majority of my campaigns are purchase campaigns, but I do have this one Instagram and Facebook page visits campaign just to get more followers and stuff. Very low budget, but you can see that in the results column, it's showing that here. Okay, so that's just something to note. Next is going to be my cost per result. So how much is it costing me to get somebody to take the action that I'm optimizing for? So in this case, it's cost per purchase, basically. How much is it costing me to get somebody to make a purchase on my website? So in this case, you can see I have $35 cost per purchase, $42, $63, and so on, right? So next is going to be purchase conversion value. So that is how much revenue is being generated from the sales on my ads, right? So here you can see the purchase conversion value on all my ads. And then our next would be ROAS, so return on ad spend. I would say this is one of the most important metrics that I look at next to cost per result. Those two are like very, very important. Purchase ROAS is your revenue generated divided by your ad spend for each campaign. So you can see I've spent about $6,000 here, and I've generated $28,200. So if you divide $28,240 divided by 6,000, you get 4.71, which is a great ROAS. In this specific ad account, the break even is around 1.6, 1.7. So this is extremely profitable. Great. So these are like the core, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 5 right here are essential. That's why I keep them all the way to the left, and I can just look at them quickly. They're there. I don't have to do any scrolling. And yeah, it's like the snapshot. It's the thing that I look at first. Then as we move to the right, I kind of have it like a funnel in a way. So you can see next is going to be reach. So that is how many unique individual people are we getting in front of. So you can see in this case, over the last 30 days, this campaign reached 164,843 people, right? These are people. Now that's not to be confused with impressions. That is how many times your ad got on a screen. Okay, so the same person can see it twice, and that's going to count here on impressions. All right, so keep that in mind. And I just like to look at reach and impressions just to see like, okay, we're spending, I like to see how many people we're getting in front of. And this also shows like your frequency metric in a way. So notice we reached 164,000 people, but we got on a 300,000 screen. So that means on average, people are seeing it around 2 times. So if we look at our frequency metrics, which tells us the average number of times each ad account center saw your ad, that makes sense, right? So you can see on average, people saw it 1.83 times. So it's pretty clear that if you multiply 164,000 by 1.83, you get that 302. So that's the relationship between reach and impressions and frequency. But next, we're going to go to CPM. So CPM, that is the market rate that we are paying Meta to advertise. So it's the cost per 1,000 impressions. Okay, that's the cost to get on 1,000 screens. So you can see here, generally we have our CPMs, which are decent. I would say we're targeting the United States in this case. $20 CPMs, kind of typical. It's not high, it's not low, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. But generally, we're trying to get a lower CPM if possible, while maintaining quality traffic, right? We don't want to have a super low CPM and then junk traffic. That doesn't help us at all. But the lowest CPM that we can get while maintaining a high quality traffic is kind of what we're looking for, okay? And I actually have an entire CPM video. I'm gonna put it right here on the screen. It's also in the description if you want to learn more about CPMs. It's a pretty deep topic. But yeah, I like to keep an eye on my CPMs. Next, cost per unique outbound click. Okay, so there's a big reason why we use cost per unique outbound click versus just a standard cost per click, for example. So cost per click, just straight up cost per click, that means it's tracking any click on the ad anywhere. So it could be on the primary text, it could be on the link, it could be on the image, it could be on your profile link, it could be in the comments. So that's tracking all those clicks. Also, it tracks if the same person clicked twice, right? So if the same person clicks 2, 3, 4 times, that's going to be reflected in that cost per click metric. And it's not gonna give you, it's gonna be double, triple counting, right? So it's not gonna give you a pure view of how compelling is my ad at getting the click, right? So the reason we use cost per unique outbound click is that per unique means each individual person, right? And when we say outbound click, that is only to the link that goes to our website. So it's not the profile link, it's not any link inside the primary text, it's not any other link anywhere else besides the link that goes to our website. So that's why we use this metric. It's very clear. It's out of all the unique individual people that saw my ad, how much is it costing me to get them to click? Okay, so for me, cost per unique outbound click is like the most pure way to see that. And this is very closely tied to how good or compelling is your ad at getting the click, okay? So in this case, the lower the better. And you can see here, I have sub $1 cost per clicks, which is ideal. I mean, the lower the better, but if you're under $1, you're doing pretty good. Okay, next is unique outbound click-through rate. So this is out of all the unique individuals that saw your ad, what percentage of them are actually clicking on the link that goes to your website? Okay, and so for me, again, it's not double counting multiple people, and it's only counting the link in your ad that goes to your website. So for me, this is a very pure view of how compelling is my ad at getting the click. Okay, so in this case, the higher the better, right? The higher click-through rate, generally the better. You do need to keep an eye on the relationship between CPM and unique outbound CTR, because you may have a super high CPM and that might artificially inflate your click-through rate. So it may look like, wow, I have a really good CTR, but in reality, you're just paying a really high CPM and you're not reaching that many people for how much you're paying, and that's artificially inflating your CTR. So that's just something to keep an eye on. But in general, the higher the click-through rate, the better, okay? So you need to benchmark against yourself and your own ads. You can't just take what you see here and say, okay, I'm gonna benchmark it against that. It's difficult. So in this ad account specifically, around 3 to 5% click-through rate is, I would consider good. We have seen some that are above 6%. These are phenomenal. But yeah, just benchmark against your own ads, right? So these two metrics are super important. They tell you like generally the performance of your ad, right? And what's the purpose of an ad, first of all? The purpose of an ad is to get them to click and go to your landing page, right? So its job is not necessarily to sell, right? It's to get them onto the landing page that is very persuasive and well built. And the landing page is what sells the product, right? That's what is persuasive, it's compelling, and it gets the person to buy. But the main job of the ad is just to get them onto that landing page. So I like to look at my cost per unique outbound click and my unique outbound CTR to see, okay, is my ad doing its job? So if I see any like astronomical cost per click, so in this specific example, you can see generally I'm getting like under $1 cost per click, but for whatever reason in this campaign, I was getting a $5.81 cost per click. That is way higher than normal. And then you can also see that in this case, I had a way lower unique outbound CTR than the rest, right? So for me, this was an obvious one. The ROAS was still pretty good, but it was less than the rest. I went ahead and killed it. I was paying too much for that, for those clicks, and for the CTR was way too low. So I went ahead and closed this one. But that's not the only reason why I closed it, just so you know. Last 7 days, this specific, let me put a check mark next to it so you can see. Last 7 days, this specific campaign was kind of dying off. So that's the real reason why I closed it. We'll talk about diagnosing problems and when to close things in a minute. So that's cost per unique outbound click and unique outbound CTR. Next, we have our hook and our hold rate. Okay, so hook rate is going to be out of all the impressions, so out of all the times you were on a screen, what percentage of people watched at least 3 seconds of it? Okay, so that's 3-second video plays divided by impressions. And you can see basically the higher the hook rate, generally the better, okay? But what's important is you're hooking the right attention, or you're hooking the right people rather. So you can have a super high hook rate, but it could just be some wacky, crazy hook that is just getting everybody's attention, which isn't necessarily what you want. You need to be getting the attention of your target audience, right? So, but generally, higher hook rate is better. And then we have our hold rate. So out of all the people that watched at least 3 seconds, what percentage of them actually watched the whole video through? That would be through plays divided by 3-second video plays. So these two are custom metrics that you can create in your columns. Okay, so hold rate, generally the longer the better, the higher the better rather. So just keep those in mind. These again are a way to assess my video creatives and how engaging are they. Okay, so we already talked about frequency. Next, we're going to get into adds to carts. Okay, so here we can see how many adds to carts we're getting and the cost, how much it's costing us to get somebody to add to cart. Then the amount of initiated checkouts we have, and then how much it's costing us to get that, and then how many purchases we have, right? So for me, it's super important to be able to assess the ratios between these. So in this case, we have 1,318 adds to carts, and we have 545 initiate checkouts, right? So for me, this is a pretty good ratio. It's like a little bit over a 2-to-1 ratio. So for every 2 adds to carts, we get 1 initiate checkout. So that's pretty good. And then here we can see 545 checkouts and then 171 purchases. That's almost like a little bit under a 3-to-1 ratio. So that's, again, pretty good. Now, if you ever see a ratio that's really high, like we see like a 6-to-1 ratio between adds to carts to initiate checkout, or a 5-to-1 from checkout to purchase, that's going to tell you there's something going on with your funnel, right? There's something about, you know, whether maybe it's your website speed's slow, or the price is too high, or there's something going on in the checkout that's causing people to leave. Maybe the shipping price is too much or something like that. Basically, this ratio, when you start dividing these numbers like this, it can give you an indication of what's going on once people are on my site. Is there a problem with my funnel? Is there a problem with the checkout process? Is the price too high? Something like that, right? So keep an eye on these ratios, and you're going to be able to diagnose problems within your funnel. So for example, if you see a really high ratio from adds to carts to initiate checkouts, that might be, maybe it's the price or the shipping, something like that. If you see a huge ratio from initiate checkout to purchase, again, it could be some sort of, maybe they still have questions or hesitations before they check out. There's something that's stopping them from checking out. So definitely worth keeping an eye on. And then the last metric that I like to look at is AOV, which is going to be your purchase conversion value divided by your purchases. But Meta actually did create a column in here called, I think it's average conversion value. Yeah, average purchase conversion value. So I created this custom metric before they actually just made the standard one. But yeah, this metric is on average, how much is average order value? So when somebody checks out, what's the average order value? So it's very important to keep an eye on that. Generally, the higher the better. If you see that a campaign is optimizing with a very small AOV, for example, that's something to keep an eye on. Maybe you need to add more upsells, or you need to incentivize the person to add more to cart before they check out. That's something, and this is pretty closely tied to your ROAS, right? If you have a lower average order value, then in general, you're going to be generating less revenue per sale, and that means your return on ad spend is probably going to be low, right? Or lower than it could be. So that's something to keep an eye on. So that is basically all the metrics that I look at, especially for e-com. For lead generation, it's much more simple. It's basically everything that I showed you, just without the ads to carts and stuff and the AOV. And really, you're just looking at cost per lead, or cost per complete registration, or cost per submit application, something like that. But now let's get into diagnosing issues just at a high level here. So first of all, cost per result, you got to look at that, right? If you're getting a very high cost per result, that's some sort of indication that there's a problem. If it's higher than your typical, or if you have a ROAS that's way less than usual, that is something to look at. Now, is that your funnel? Is that your creative? How do we know, right? So the next thing that I would look at is, okay, are my cost per click and CTR numbers looking normal, right? And I always compare it to another campaign that's done well. So you need to benchmark against yourself. Try to, like for example, this top campaign is great. This is one that's doing really well. So I would benchmark this. And what I mean is, the next time that I launch a campaign, I'm trying to achieve something similar, right? I'm trying to get around a 64-cent cost per click, and I'm trying to get a 5.71 outbound CTR. So it's very important that you benchmark against yourself. If I were to see a bad cost per result, and then I look over and I see my cost per click is really high, or my CTR is really low, then that would tell me, okay, my ad's not doing its job. It's not compelling enough. It's not grabbing the right attention. It's not persuasive enough to get the click, right? So I need to work on my creative. So that's what I would look at. I would look at maybe the angles, or the copy, or the headlines, or the video hooks, stuff like that, right? Also, like hook and hold rate. If it's a video, I would look at my hook and hold rates. If they're lower than what they typically are, that would be another indication that, okay, it's probably my creative that's the problem. Now, if those metrics look fine, they look normal and they're driving traffic, but I still see, for example, a really high cost per result, then I would start looking over here at my ads to carts, my checkouts initiated, my purchases, to see, okay, are my ratios off? Is there something going on with my ratios? Are people dropping off after they add to cart, right? If all of that's looking fine, and let's say my ROAS is still really low, then I would look at my average order value, right? Is my average order value really low, so I'm not generating enough revenue per sale, which is driving my ROAS down, right? That's a possibility. Or if the cost per result is really high, then maybe it's like the price of my product, or the offer is not good enough, if all the other metrics look good, right? So generally, that is kind of how I am assessing these things. But for me, if I had to kind of summarize, I'm mainly focusing on amount spent, how many purchases or leads am I getting, my cost per purchase or cost per lead, and my ROAS, right? All those are like my core metrics that I look at across all my accounts. Now, if those metrics are in order, perfect. And I'm trying to make incremental improvements, I may start to look at the various click-through rates, cost per clicks, to see which ads are standouts, so I can make variations and stuff like that. But really, I'm focusing in first on my ROAS and my CPA, or my cost per result, and then I'm looking at my softer metrics, right? We don't call it a winner just because it has like a high CTR, for example, and no sales. That's not a winner, guys. A winner is when something has a lot of spend, has a lot of sales, has high ROAS, and it is generally profitable for you. It's proven, right? I don't call something proven unless it has a lot of spend through it. Okay, so yeah, I really will look at these, and then I will start to look at the softer metrics. If I'm not sure what the problem is, I'll start looking at, okay, is it my creatives? I'm looking at the cost per click and the CTR, or the hook rate, the hold rate, or maybe those are fine. Is it maybe my funnel, or is it my product, or is it my offer? Then I'm looking over at these ratios and stuff like that. Also, don't forget about frequency, right? I don't look at frequency that much, but in general, like if you see your frequency kind of skyrocketing, then maybe you're doing a lot of retargeting, and that, that could potentially, you might be burning through a limited size audience or something like that. Just something to keep an eye on there too. But it's not that common, not that big a deal in my opinion. What I always say is, like, imagine watching a sporting event, right? How many times do you see the same exact commercial? There's some people out there that will say, oh, if your frequency gets above whatever, number 5, then it's bad, you got to kill it, it's fatiguing, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense. As long as my ROAS is good, for example, this is a retargeting ad, so we won't really look at this one, but like the second one here, right? It's getting a 2 frequency. On average, people are seeing this ad twice. Am I concerned? Not at all, right? I'm targeting hundreds of millions of people, right? My ROAS is good. I'm not going to prematurely turn this off just because I see my frequency metric going up. It is truly a badge of honor to have an ad that runs for months and months and months, or years, okay? So that's the goal, ultimately, to find ads that are profitable and that you can run them for a super long time without touching them. So guys, that's pretty much it when it comes to the metrics in meta ads. This is what I look at. I like to keep it simple. I like to focus on what matters, which is those key metrics that I mentioned. And then I will also look at, the full context with the other metrics. But I hope this was helpful. I also have a PDF in my school community where I break all this down and I show you how to set this up. But basically, just to show you really briefly, we'll click on this button here, and then you can click the pencil icon or customize columns, and then you can start searching the metrics that I was talking about. You add them over onto the right-hand column, and then I like to uncheck all of these. This kind of just duplicates the data. But yeah, you just set it up in the way. You can pause this video, watch my columns, and set it up in the same exact way, and then you can be confident that you're running ads like somebody that does it all day, every day for a living. So that's it. Thank you so much. All right, you guys, that's it for today's video. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you need extra guidance or you want one-on-one support with me, I highly recommend that you check out my school community. It's called Meta Ads Mastery. For less than 1 day's worth of ad spend, you can have direct access to me 24/7 to ask whatever questions you have. This is a community of experienced advertisers where we are talking about the absolute latest strategies that are working across various ad accounts at scale. It's also a place where you can network with other experienced advertisers and brand owners. So if that's something that interests you, click the link in the description to learn more. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much. Take care.